Howdy, it's Jim Morado, and today we're driving to Mammoth Cave National Park. Actually, we are inside of Mammoth Cave National Park, driving towards the cave. Gonna do a cave tour. And I've done this a lot in my life. I love Mammoth Cave National Park. I love the cave. I love this area. This is just a great area to go and drive. Even if you don't go see the cave, we usually see some wildlife. In fact, I know we're about to see some coming up here fairly soon. But the park is always beautiful. It's just a great place to go. Again, even if you're not going to the cave, we do go do a cave tour on this day in June. Actually, June 20th, 2020, while the whole pandemic thing is going on. We decided it would be nice to go to Mammoth Cave. We heard that they had opened up recently, and they were doing some limited tours through the cave. In fact, the only tour that they're doing as of this moment is an extended historic tour, self-guided. And it's kind of a new, I don't think it's something they've done exactly this way before. I know we've done the self-guided tour before, and it's a much smaller kind of stick your head in the cave almost, look around. The usual self-guided tour, to me, I think is more limited. This had a whole lot more going for it. They actually had rangers stationed throughout the cave at different spots telling you about the cave. And I think as we're slowing down, I think we saw a deer up here on the right, and we were looking over to check it out. I don't know if that showed up on the video or not. Or maybe we're seeing it right there. Nope, I guess we passed it up. Anyway, we do see a couple of deer as we're driving around in a turkey. So yeah, they're doing an extended self-guided historic tour at the moment, and it ended up being a real treat. And they're doing a timed entry kind of thing where you go in about every minute or two. They let another couple go through, if I understood correctly, or family or group. And it ended up being a really nice, different way to see the cave. And I'll show more of that later. Mammoth Cave, I've grew up in western Kentucky. I grew up in Owensboro, and we would go down to Mammoth Cave as much as we could. Even then, though, growing up in the 80s, rural western Kentucky, Mammoth Cave was over an hour away, and that, for us at the time, was still kind of a significant trip. But I do remember making it here, yeah, enough to be excited about it. The very first time I went to Mammoth Cave, I want to say, was probably around the early to mid 80s. I remember my cousin Jerry, my uncle Johnny, and my aunt Joanne invited me to go with them one day. And that was the first time I ever went to Mammoth Cave, and I remember just being in awe of everything. I know we drove up in my uncle Johnny's old pickup truck. We got there and we bought a ticket, probably for the historic tour. And he had recently had some heart issues, and they recommended that if you had heart issues to maybe not go on the historic tour. So we ended up swapping those out for the presidential tour. The presidential tour was named that because you basically went down and saw the part of the cave that Ronald Reagan saw when he visited Mammoth Cave. I want to say maybe it was 83, 84. It was shortly after he was shot and recovering. He came to Mammoth Cave. It was, I believe, his very first public appearance. Here's a deer right ahead of us, by the way. A little doe there just standing there looking at us. She would be the last one we would see today. Usually we see a whole bunch, especially as we get towards the visitor center. Anyway, Ronald Reagan came and visited the cave, and for some time they named that particular tour that he took the presidential tour. And it was a very low, it wasn't a very exhausting tour to go on. They recommended it for people, who had heart issues or that sort of thing. So we did the presidential tour, and it was a lot of fun. I remember going into the visitor center, watching a movie, and just thinking the whole thing was really over the top. And at that point in my life, it sure was. It still is. Years later, my buddy Brent and I would go to Mammoth Cave frequently. I remember one day school had been canceled in Davis County for snow, and we just got our driver's licenses, and we drove to Mammoth Cave, which was a brilliant idea. We probably told our parents we were just going to go hang out in Owensboro, but we went and drove to Mammoth Cave and had a great time. It had really snowed a lot. I remember the roads being crazy slick. We should have known better, but we didn't, and we went to Mammoth Cave, and it seemed like we had the whole park to ourselves. Nobody else showed up that day. I want to say it was in February. It was kind of a low visitor turnout day anyway, and we had a nice tour, if I remember correctly, all to ourselves, and it just seemed like we were the only people at the park, and that was a lot of fun for us. I'm sure the Rangers there wished those two guys that skipped school, or not skipped school, but came down on a bad day, hadn't shown up. And I remember the visitor center. It used to be different. They've rebuilt the visitor center. They've rebuilt the bridge that kind of connects from the visitor center to the lodge. There have been some changes. The structure's still the same. It's still very familiar. But it always seemed to me that you'd walk into the main visitor center, and it was a smaller operation than what it is now. And the gift shop was more of almost like a kiosk kind of thing. It was almost like they had a bookshelf. And I remember they had some really great books. And it seems like they wrote better books back in the 80s than they do now. I know that's not accurate. But I just remember, maybe it's because I didn't have access to so many books. And when you would see books, it was a really special thing. But I remember they used to have those great guides, those leather-bound guides to animals. Like you could buy a book on bats, and it would show a picture and give a description of every type of bat known. I'm sure those books are still out there. I need to look for them, but it just seems harder to find something like that. But they always had them at the gift shop there, and I was always impressed. I also remember buying at the lodge gift shop. I remember buying the Mammoth Cave Viewmaster reels. Remember Viewmaster reels? Those are still cool. I still pick those up ever so often, especially the ones relating to a national park or a location that I love. I wish they still sold Viewmaster reels, but they're so with computers and your smartphone and all that, it's almost, why bother buying anything with just pictures of something, even if they are cool and three-dimensional. But I still like Viewmasters. I've still got my Mammoth Cave Viewmaster reels, and I'll pop them out and look at them ever so often. So yeah, we're about to park. We're coming to the parking lot of the visitor center, and we're about to park. I had another friend back in high school, the Schaefer family. I used to hang out with them all the time. Sweet people. They had a big family trip up to Mammoth Cave, and I went with them. And yeah, look at the line there. They're kind of holding up the line. I don't think it's quite 9 o'clock. The visitor center hasn't opened yet, but they're trying to do the social distancing thing. So people are lined up to get their tickets to go into the visitor center. And there's even a little booth. Yeah, there's a little booth tent thing set up over there. There's a sign about social distancing. They have some stickers on the sidewalk too. I've noticed as we've been out a little bit more lately with the social distancing, I think people are just so happy to be out and around people that they forget to keep their distance. I know some people just don't think, but I've noticed, we were at a restaurant the other day, and this little older fella was talking to the waitress, and he grabbed her arm. It was nothing weird or anything. I think he was just, she'd been really nice to him, and he was telling her something, and he grabbed her arm. The waitress didn't pull back, or, she didn't act freaked out or anything like that. She was very polite about everything, but I just don't think people... I think once they get out in public, they kind of lose their minds a little bit after being cooped up. Anyway, back to my story about going here with my friends from high school, the Schaefer family. We went, and we had a great time. We did the big tour, the big 4.5-hour marathon hike through the cave, which I'd like to do again one of these days. I'm not sure if I'm as up for it as I was back then, but I'd like to do it again. And it was a lot of fun. You actually have lunch down in the cave, and you cover just a whole lot of the cave, pretty much most of what's publicly viewable. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, and this is some shaky camera work, but I just wanted to show that there's some stickers kind of showing you where to go, which line to get into. There's the little booth that the National Park Rangers have set up. They have some cute little stickers telling you which way to the restroom, to the gift shop, to buy tickets. We had reserved tickets already, so we were good, but there were still people showing up without tickets. And with Mammoth Cave, you need to pre-order your tickets. You need to call a day or two ahead of time because they sell out in the morning real quick. And you can see how the visitor center is a lot less hopping than it usually is. They've got things roped off. Even the little gift shop here. And I just passed the main gift shop on my right, and I'm going back to the back. Well, there's a gift shop up here on my left now that's closed. They've totally closed that off. That's the big gift shop. Then they have this little kind of quasi gift shop set up here. And for this particular day, they actually set up a tent gift shop behind the visitor center. So, I always like to look for postcards and bookmarks and patches. It was a little harder to do on this day, but that was no big deal. Oh, yeah, there's a sign about the Mammoth Cave Hotel. I might try to read some of these. I'm not going to read this one, but it gives a little history on the Mammoth Cave Hotel. We actually stayed at the Mammoth Cave Lodge sometime last year. They kind of have some outdoor places that you can stay at. Not outdoor. They're little lodges. They're little kind of like hotel. Small rooms connected to each other. You're not in a lodge. You're not inside of a place where you can step out and go to the front desk and ask for a bar of soap. So we stayed there on a night last year, and it was okay. It's a bit more rugged than it should be, in my opinion. It was nice, but for the price, well, you're paying top dollar to be right there on the park property. Yeah, we stayed not in these, if you can. The trees are kind of blocking them out, but we stayed in kind of some linked rooms. And I think there was us and another family, and that was it. Kind of a little bit of a creepy moment late at night, but there was a great view that we left our window open, and you could just see out. You could see the trees and all that good stuff. It was neat being on the property at night. And we drove in to the parking lot and parked probably at 9 o'clock, and there were deer everywhere. And that was really special. Here's some information about the railroad. The railroad that used to be in front of Mammoth Cave and brought people out to Mammoth Cave. Kind of a big deal for this area. It really was the first bit of transportation that brought people to Mammoth Cave. Obviously, at first it was something you had to have some money to be able to afford. I think right there it's saying a $3 ticket to get you those last few miles to Mammoth Cave. And actually on this particular day, before our cave tour, we had a couple hours to kill, and we did a little hike basically through the trail that was part of the railroad, the railroad trail back when. And they have little markers set up kind of telling you where you are, and there's still some historic markers on that trail. That trail looks to be, roughly estimated, I'm sure you can look this up specifically, about 10 miles long. Oh, and here's the train that sets out in front of the park. You kind of see this right as you drive into the park, right before you get to the visitor center if you've not been there before. I like old trains. But there are markers set up as you do the trail telling you where you're at in relationship to the cave especially. But yeah, I've been going to Mammoth Cave for years, and okay, yeah, and there's the post office. There's a post office and like a little camper supply store connected to it. This is a great post office. I love postal history. I've stopped here before to mail postcards, and because I collect postmarks, there's a really nice postmaster there. Felicia Jones is her name, and I've talked to her several times, and she takes a lot of pride in the cave's history and the postal system there. We've talked about a ton of things. She's got some stories relating to when Reagan visited. Has a little bit of a personal connection too. She was telling me a little bit about one of Reagan's doctors that she knew. She's also got some first aid covers and some other cool items kind of hung up in the post office. Just if you go there, stop by and ask her to hand cancel some postcards before you mail them out. There's some more information about the railroad as we're going on to the trail. This is a little trail too. It's fairly close to the visitor center. If you only have like an hour or two to kill before a cave tour, this is just a nice little hike to take. It's open. It's near where people camp. It's paved. Yeah, but the lodge is, I wanted to mention the lodge too again. I wanted to bring it back up. It's nice to, if you want to stay within meters, yards from the cave, from the visitor center, it's a good place to stay. If you're into bed and breakfasts and nice hotels, I almost feel bad saying there's not a lot of options. There's some chain and some kind of budget motel options right in this area. But, and I have friends that camp out here too, so that's a good option. I believe I do film some of the tents up here in a little bit. I know we walked by the campground. They did, and my wife and I argued about this a little bit. You'll see as we walk down the trail, they actually have kind of red taped off some of the campsites. They're showing the trail, and again, I think it's about 10 miles. It might even say on this sign. This particular trail goes for a while. It would be kind of fun and have some bragging rights if you hiked the whole thing. I might have to do that one of these days. But here's some information about it. Yeah, so they had some red tape up showing, don't, set your tent up here, don't set your tent up there. And I thought, wow, couldn't they have used a small flag or something? But my wife thought it was a good idea to keep the campers apart during this time. I thought it took away from some of the natural beauty, but whatever. Oh, here's a sign. We are standing directly above the Giant's Coffin. I thought that was pretty neat. I know the Giant's Coffin well. We'll see it later on the video. But there's a sign telling you, hey, you're standing directly above the legendary Giant's Coffin. Here's another sign saying you're standing above the tuberculosis huts. That's a story. It's a well-known story that they thought they could cure TB by putting TB patients down in the cave, and they made some little, I believe they did 10 huts, and 2 of them still exist down in the cave. But there was a doctor who tried to cure tuberculosis in the cave. Here's the campground. You can see some of the red in the background where they've, I think, roped off some tent spots. I guess it's not that big of a deal, and God bless them for trying to do things right. I love the rangers, especially at Mammoth. I love all the park rangers. That's one of those, if I could go back and do everything again, I'd love to be a park ranger. That is just a rock star job to me. Yeah, it just does not get any cooler than being a ranger. And these guys do a great job. A little more about the trail and about the railroad. I believe this sign is similar to the one I filmed further up on the trail. And here's a little sign showing us that we are directly above Fat Man's Misery, which we don't see on this particular tour because they had it closed off for the self-guided tour. And I'm going to stop talking here for a moment. One of the rangers is going to do an intro to the tour, and I kind of want to preserve that on the video. It's again, with times being different, I think this is pretty interesting, so I'm going to leave it in.
Please put your camera modes on, no flash. When you're in the cave, do not touch the cave ceiling. Don't try to be a hero and jump up and touch it. Do not touch the side. Whatever you guys bring into the cave, including children, please bring them out. No food, no selfie sticks, no walking sticks, no drinks other than water is permitted in the cave. Please stay on the trails at all times. There are rangers down there stationed throughout. If you need to ask them a question, as long as you don't draw a great big huge crowd around you, you may do so. When you guys are done, you're going to walk across the mats behind us and cleanse your souls. We have white nose syndrome, and we don't want it to spread to other cave systems within the park or outside. Since we have a new way of looking at life with COVID-19, we ask that you guys, when you're going into the trail, to stay to one side. If you meet another group, single file, to allow them to pass, you guys could pass, and then continue on back to your groupness. But we just want to keep you guys all safe and enjoy the cave. So if you have the 10:45, if one person in the group could just show me the times, I appreciate it.
Yeah, the ranger there, I thought that was great, and it's a rare introduction because that's, you know, again, with the coronavirus going on, that's an introduction they won't be doing a year from now, hopefully. So that's, you know, a unique time in our history at the moment. You might hear some rain in the background. It's raining where I'm at this moment. I hope that doesn't distract. Yeah, so we're going into the cave. I don't think I really filmed it there as we went in. Somebody had recently graffitied the main entrance door to the historic entrance here. I asked some of the rangers later if they caught whoever did it, and they said they had not, but they have them on video. Somebody was very bold doing that, and it always breaks my heart when you see that, especially at a national park. That's just unnecessary. But we are going through. This is the very, very, very front of Mammoth Cave. After you walk through the kind of gated doors, you go down the hill, you go down some steps. There's some other people leaving their tour on the way out. But we're going into the cave. Forgive my shaky camera work. It gets better, but I'll tell you honestly, it gets worse too. I wanted to leave as much of the cave tour in as possible, but sometimes with the lights down here, things get blurry. It's hard to videotape. But I do like to keep things as complete as possible. I think we actually spent close to an hour and a half down in the cave on this particular day. And I really enjoy being in the cave as much as I possibly can. I think we're going to trade a little greeting with her. Howdy. How are you?
Sure. But then at the turnaround point, you'll head back here to check out the opposite way.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, we're just kind of going through the saltpeter mine area as you come towards the front at the rotunda. Very well-known area of Mammoth Cave. Just about most of any tour, not all of them, but most of the tours come through here. And I think that's just a big, big room that you always remember because it's so big. And going back to what I was talking about earlier, mentioning rangers, I've read a couple books lately by some rangers that kind of go back to just how cool rangers are. I read a book called Ranger Confidential by Andrea Langford, and it actually has nothing to do with Mammoth Cave, but she was a ranger at several different parks, and she wrote a great book. She's written a couple of good books. Look all of her books up. There's one about haunted hikes in the national parks, and this one, Ranger Confidential. She talks about her friends that are rangers, their life. She's actually present and witnesses some crazy fatalities in the parks, and she just talks very openly about her experiences in the park and dealing with people and helping people and dealing with difficult visitors. But it's a great book. I just wanted to mention that somewhere. Yeah, here's some info about relics found in the cave. Objects and evidence of human activity found along 12 miles of cave passage led archaeologists to conclude the Mammoth Cave was first explored some 4,000 years ago. And they've actually got some great relics displayed over here on the right. I'm going to look at those in just a second. But they're lit up, and, you know, kind of as part of your cave tour, you get to go in and actually see some of these great old items. Here's a piece of gourds. People from the late Archaic and early woodland Indian periods were using gourds for food as well as containers for minerals taken from the cave. Let's see, we're walking around some more, going back towards the main room at the front with the saltpeter mines. Another ranger, I wanted to mention a ranger specifically connected to Mammoth Cave who wrote several books, Colleen O'Connor Olson. She was a ranger at Mammoth Cave. I never got to meet her. I always thought I would. And unfortunately, a year or two ago, she passed away. And I was really sad to hear that because I just figured I would bump into her at some point. But she wrote a whole bunch of great books on Mammoth Cave. A couple that I like in particular, Scary Stories of Mammoth Cave. She gets into all the good ghost stories, mummies, that kind of stuff. And she wrote another book, it was her last one, Mammoth Cave Curiosities, a guide to rockphobia, dating, saber-toothed cats, and other subterranean marvels, by Colleen O'Connor Olson. Lots of just fun books that are very accessible to any reader, young, old. I let my dad borrow that one before he passed away, and he liked it. And I'm sure, a grade school kid would enjoy reading about it. She gives all the good information, the history, crazy stories about celebrities visiting the cave. That's just a good book. Check that out when you have a moment. She talks about Elton John visiting the cave and other big names. One thing that always gets to me is every time I'm in a cave, they always talk about how a rock hasn't fallen from the ceiling in 10,000 years or something like that. Here's some information on the saltpeter mining. By the way, Colleen in her book dispels some one of the more interesting rumors about saltpeter. So she covers a lot of ground in her book. But she does mention that in 1994 there was an ice storm that caused 40 tons of rock to fall in the rotunda where we're standing right now. So that was interesting. So Mammoth Cave has had some rocks to fall recently, as recently as 1994. They had some rocks to fall from the ceiling. She talks about she gets into how safe caves are when you're during an earthquake. She gets into a whole lot about animals in the cave too, but I wanted to mention her, just a name that pops up concerning Mammoth Cave a lot. She contributed a lot of books about Mammoth Cave to the world, so we have those now and we'll always have those, and her name will always be solidly linked to Mammoth Cave. And she's written some other books too. She gets into a lot of history of the cave. Yeah, so that's a name to look up, especially maybe before a visit to Mammoth Cave. Look up some of her books, especially the Mammoth Cave Curiosities book. That's one I like a whole lot. Another tour guide that I want to mention is Jerry Bransford. Jerry Bransford. Google that name. There's not as much out there on him as there should be. He is a 5th generation guide at the Mammoth Cave. The Bransford name is, along with Floyd Collins. Yeah, there are 4 or 5 historic names attached to the cave, and his is one of them. Going back to the slave days, his was a great grandfather was a slave guide. There were the 2 Bransfords, so his grandfather and his great grandfather and his brother were some of the literally original modern guides at Mammoth Cave. He tells a story that I want to say in the 60s. He went to Mammoth Cave and he could not sit in the dining room because he was black. And later on, he was contacted by Mammoth Cave when they realized his heritage and his relationship to the cave. And they later on called him up and asked him to be a guide at the Mammoth Cave to continue that legacy, and he did. And he is a very nice fella. I've talked to him several times. I didn't have my video camera with me, though, the last time I was at the park and bumped into him. But he is just a really, really nice, humble person. As far as I'm concerned, he might be the most interesting person in Kentucky. When you talk about history and links to the past, to me, he is just a significant person for Kentucky history, for Mammoth Cave history, and it's a real treat when you can do a tour and have him as a guide. He doesn't do it that often, though. I think he's only, he's at that point in his life where he can kind of, I think he works maybe, during the week or something, but man, is he exciting. And I wanted to mention him some. We're in an area right now, this is the Methodist Church. I was just blown away by the fact that we were the only people in this area, and I did not even notice that there was this ranger right here, but she's going to do a little talk here in a moment, so I'm going to stop talking for just a moment. It's kind of a rare moment to have this whole area to ourselves. Oh. You're being all stealthy. You got any good interpretation for us?
Yeah, so you're in an area that's called the Methodist Church. They did actually hold church services here in the mid-1800s, like the 1860s. Interesting points about that. This is Pulpit Rock up here, and that's where the preacher would stand. There's a way to get back there by climbing around up here. But there's all this soot up on the wall because he took the entire congregation's lanterns up there with him.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the lanterns, of course, gave him light to see by. It also gave him a captive audience because his whole congregation doesn't have any light by which to get out of the cave. So they're here as long as he wants to preach to them. Good thing for them is that they're in the world's first air-conditioned church. And so they're not out sweltering in the 89-degree day. They're down here in the 54-degree comfort. There is, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, it took me a minute, but allegedly in this rock here is the face of Jesus.
Oh, I totally see it. Yeah.
And then all
like
around,
it's super there. Like I can totally see it.
yeah. And it definitely depends on the angle which you're standing, so you must have gotten a good spot.
Do you see it, Jen?
Right on this rock. It took me a while, but
Well, I mean, once you pointed it out to me, like his eyes are closed and everything.
yeah,
it
it's
is
kind of got like a sad, I don't know,
Yeah.
hanging on the cross expression.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's also all these sooty patches throughout this area, and that's from a practice called torch throwing. So before there were all these electric lights and cool flashlights and things, the guides would soak pieces of rag in kerosene or something flammable, light them on fire, and use a special stick, kind of like an atlatl if you've ever heard of those, to launch the rags into the further parts of the cave so that their visitors could see the further reaches. That actually happened here up until the end of 1990.
Oh, wow. Really?
Just in a demonstration capacity.
Okay.
But this was a spot where they did a lot of those demonstrations as well. So, yeah. So
How is that face of Jesus? Is it etched?
No, it's just the way the rock is.
You're seeing it though, right?
Yes.
Yeah, just the way the rock is.
Well, no one's pointed that out to me before. That was worth the price of admission today, right there.
Yeah, it's a neat one.
Yeah. Have you ever had the opportunity to climb up there? Have you?
I have not yet, but this is my first season here, and it's something I do hope to do
Yeah.
before I leave this summer.
That's great.
Yeah,
Well, thank you. We appreciate that.
no problem. Yeah, not at all.
And how great was that? That young ranger was telling us all about the Methodist Church and the preachers there, and showed us Jesus, which I thought was pretty cool, considering the first ranger we encountered at the entrance was talking about cleansing our souls. So this was a very religious experience on this particular day, as Mammoth Cave always is. That's true. But yeah, that again, we were in that room all to ourselves, I thought, and I did not even notice that ranger kind of hidden over to the side, in the part of the cave that's technically known as the Methodist Church. So that was kind of cool, and we're about to come up on another ranger here shortly who's kind of standing there. It took me a second to notice him too, and he tells us a little bit about what he mentioned as a new entrance kind of crack starting to form. But yeah, there were rangers kind of scattered about. You almost had to look for them, and they seemed pretty eager to talk to you if you wanted to stop and chat. Howdy.
Howdy.
You got some information for us?
What would you like to know?
What's here?
Well, right there is a relatively recent cave passage beginning to form.
Oh.
So much later than this passage, you have a crack in the sandstone up above that's allowing water to come down through there. So it's carving more vertically as opposed to horizontally. Come back in 1,000,000 years, I'll probably still be working here. You might be able to walk back there 100 feet.
You're on. How young is it?
Oh, it's very young. It's still being formed today.
So when do you think it started?
Oh, I would guess that's a tough question to guess, but let's say, a couple 100,000 years ago.
Ah, wow.
So this main passage you're in is millions of years old.
All right, well, thank you.
Sure thing.
Yeah, and there was another ranger eager to talk to us about the cave. I should have thrown a harder question at him, but yeah, he was polite and chatted with us a little bit. And we're walking towards the Giant's Coffin that you'll see here shortly. And I know the camera work gets a little blurry. As we're walking up through here, there's right in the path, you're kind of seeing it, but it's dark. There's where kind of a boulder rock is sort of right in the middle of the path, and even though they've paved it and there's a railing, they've kind of worked around that rock, and I always think that's interesting. Just kind of an interesting part of the cave. I think we might see it a little better as we're coming up, as we go back, as we turn around and go back the other way. Again, coming up on probably one of the most well-known formations in the cave, the Giant's Coffin. There's another ranger here stationed. I kind of like this video because she's kind of in silhouette. She's blacked out, but she's standing in front of the coffin, and we're talking about mummies and some of the more strange parts of the cave. So we'll let her talk. She's a lot of fun. Thanks.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Did you folks have any questions so far?
This is the Giant's Coffin, right?
Sure is, yeah.
Is this where they found the mummies?
So it's actually where they used to display the mummies.
Ah, okay.
Right over there in that section off to the side, there's a display case
Oh.
with one mummy called Lost John. I'm going to flash it up.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So right about there is where they would have had the case. Lost John was found a couple 100 feet around the corner, smushed under a rock. He had been mining.
This way you would have
Yes.
been found? Okay.
Past the tuberculosis huts is where he was found.
Okay.
But he was displayed there for a couple of years, and then the Park Service made the decision. It is a little bit macabre to be displaying these mummies that were found here. So we re-entombed him somewhere in the cave in an unknown location
Yes.
to me. Someone knows where he's at, but that is very highly classified information.
Sure. When did they stop displaying them?
Ooh, I believe it was sometime in the 70s.
Okay, okay.
70s. I don't remember the exact year.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sometimes people come and they ask me, where's the mummy?
Oh.
Because they visited, a long time
Yes.
ago as a kid or even as an adult. Say, oh, we took them out.
I remember being here in the mid-'80s and not seeing a mummy, so yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
No problem.
Huh? Oh, sure.
Doing well.
Wondering about this?
Yes. Oh,
This
okay.
is one of the ways that people used to light the cave when they were visiting. So I'll show you the problem with it, is if you walk too fast, it might just go out. So you gotta be real careful, and if you knock it over or drop it, the fuel spills right out, so you lose all your fuel. So you have to be very, very careful with it. And of course that doesn't really give you a whole lot of light. And if you get stuck in here in the dark, you don't know which way to go. You can try to feel your way down that, but you might go down the wrong passageway. You pretty much, your best bet would be to sit and wait for someone to come for you.
Wow.
Thankfully today we have our very nice electrical lights. We don't have to worry about it too much. Another way that guides used to light the cave is they would set rags with flammable liquid on fire that were wrapped around rocks, and then they would throw them. So they would throw them up here, you see that black spot up there. That's where you can throw the rags to light up those at far away sections of the cave so that you can see them. You'll find spots like that all over. They continued torch throwing just like that through the 1990s, up until 1990, because it was just a cool thing to see, but they didn't realize how much damage they were actually doing to the cave. You know, nobody's going to come clean that off. That is going to be there forever until this cave collapses hundreds of millions of years from now.
So does the other tour go down that direction and go down?
Yeah, in a normal, happy world where everyone's good, we would go down that way, but it gets so tight. I don't know if I broke a bone the other day going down some of those stairs, because you have to hold on to those handrails.
Yeah.
I was trying to avoid.
So that's a big problem, everybody touching the
Yeah, and a lot of guides go back there to eat our lunch instead of walking back up the hill. So yeah, to get back to the lunch area, you got to go down the stairs. You got to duck and also go sideways at the same time. So we can't let people on the small things go.
No, it's something.
Yeah, really soon. Yeah.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Something on the ceiling. I didn't hear that. It could have been someone running a little further off and it didn't move right there.
Howdy. So what's going on over here?
So this passageway behind me is a section known as Harvey's Lost Way. So in the early 1800s, the cave was owned by a man named Franklin Gorin, and he had a nephew named Charles Harvey. And one day Charles had gone on a tour down here, a guided tour, and he left something behind. It's not exactly sure what it was. It was probably a notebook or a hat or something like that. But he left the group, brought his torch with him, and then found his item, but then misjudged the turn he was supposed to take to get back with the group, and ended up down this passageway here. Well, eventually his lantern or his torch went out, and so he was basically stuck in the dark for 39 hours until they found him again. And when they found him, he was sitting bashing two rocks together. And the searchers were like, oh, that's such a good idea. We were able to find you because you were bashing the rocks. That's a great idea. And his response was basically, I was hitting the rocks together to chase away the silence.
Oh, wow.
It's dark and it's quiet.
What a great story.
That's why you should always stay with your tour group.
Yes.
Don't get lost like Charles.
No kidding. All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Move around on the side path to get back. Let me know if y'all need questions. Yeah, back in the 1840s, there was no cure, so they thought that perhaps Mammoth Cave, the dry cave here, could help cure them. Unfortunately, it did not work, so there's kind of an experiment out here. So. Yeah, pretty incredible. Yes. Hey folks, did you all hear my spiel just a minute ago?
No, go ahead.
Okay, and so you're coming to the end of the line here. What you can take a look at back here are the tuberculosis huts from the 1840s. At that point in time, there was no cure for tuberculosis. And so people came out here for less than a year to see if Mammoth Cave could cure them. Unfortunately, it did not work, but they thought the dry cave air could possibly provide some relief. Unfortunately, that didn't work at all, though. We still do have 2 tuberculosis huts up that you can take a look at. To help us maintain social distance, we're going to ask you to stay on the main path here, and then loop around just like what that group's doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
So these usually aren't seen on the historic tour, are they?
The extended historic tour.
Okay. It's kind of a treat. I wasn't expecting to see them today.
Yeah,
so
I'm glad you get to see it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, so we come out to here, and then unfortunately we can't go underneath behind Giant's Coffin.
Oh, sure.
Have you been on a historic tour?
We probably come out every 3 to 6 months.
Okay, that's awesome.
This is a great park to come to, even if you don't go through the cave, but we
we try to go through the cave as much as we can.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, I certainly love it a lot, and I think this is a pretty nice offering to be able to kind of go at your own pace, be able to take.
Absolutely is, yeah. It's a treat. You know, it's a.
I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad you get to see the TV huts.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, so there we just talked to 3 different guides along our trip. I edited out a little bit of walking in between each of those, and right now we're looking at those old tuberculosis clinic huts, which is pretty cool. I actually, the tours I've been on lately, I haven't got to see those. It's been a long time since I've been on a tour that got to go by the TB huts, so this was a kind of a treat to me. I liked it a lot. I was just happy to get to see them. They had, you know, other people coming up behind us, so I didn't linger here too long, but I was still happy to see them. And it was great talking to those last 3 rangers. We talked to the one girl about there at the Giant's Coffin, and that's just a great, I mean, it looks like a giant's coffin. It's such a great formation. Usually on most tours that I've been on, you kind of walk behind the coffin, then you go through Fat Man's Misery, and it's kind of a labyrinth of just tight passages that you go through, and that's pretty cool. But it is a tight squeeze. Obviously, that they didn't have it open today because of the social distancing and all that, and you know, it would be kind of hard to manage people going through there to and on. It'd be hard to keep a ranger posted through that area. Looks like we're coming up on Giant's Coffin again. We talked to the other ranger about the story of the guy banging on the rocks to keep the silence from driving him crazy. That's just a great story. And then that last ranger we talked to about the tuberculosis clinics, that was a lot of fun. And we're going back by the Giant's Coffin again, walking out. An area that we're sort of walking towards, I think I edited it out earlier because my camera work was just too blurry. There's the booth, the ledge where Edwin Booth supposedly did a little performance. Actually, Colleen O'Connor Olson, I believe it was her in one of her books, sort of says that story is apocryphal. It didn't really happen. Edwin Booth was at Mammoth Cave. There is more people coming towards us. You can see a lot of people out enjoying the cave today, which is pretty cool. And it's nice just taking a casual walk through the cave at your own pace. Anyway, Edwin Booth did come to the cave, and he wrote about it, I believe, in a letter. But there's no real evidence that he gave a performance. Edwin Booth, as you probably know, was the brother of Abraham Lincoln presidential assassin John Wilkes Booth. By most accounts, the other Booth brothers, they were all actors, the other Booth brothers were good guys. And it seems Edwin actually toured around trying to show people, you know, trying to get some credibility back for the Booth name. But they, you know, if you read up on the other Booths, they seem like they were good, decent people. You know, had a lot of work to do to try to clean their name up a little bit, or a lot. But anyway, yeah, from what I understand, that story actually, Edwin Booth did not give a performance in the cave. But I've heard guides actually say that he did, so maybe they know something that I don't know. Who knows? Still an interesting story. I wanted to mention Jerry Bransford just a little bit more. I know I talked about him earlier, the 5th generation cave guide. I can't say enough about how nice of a person he is. He was, I don't know if he still is or not, he was trying to raise some money to put up a monument to the Bransford family there at Mammoth Cave. I donated some money to it. Google around, it's definitely a worthy cause, and the family obviously, I think in anybody's opinion, would deserve a monument. Yeah, it's just exciting when you get to see him there. When he's talking on a tour and then he mentions, his connection. He mentions it briefly. he's obviously proud of it, but he's not trying to brag about it. And it's exciting when you realize you're getting some interpretation from a guide who has that kind of connection and history with the cave. Yeah, and we are still walking through the cave, going back out. A couple of things that, as I think about it, I might have been a little too hard on the Mammoth Cave Lodge. It's a fun place. Just let me be totally honest about that. Our TV didn't work, and one of the windows was a little bit cracked, but it was really cool being close to the cave and being close to the park. And just having all that great access to the area. It was a fun experience, but I would say it was a little pricey for what it was. Still, there aren't a ton of options in the area, like I mentioned. One that I didn't mention earlier, though, and I definitely need to, and I probably should talk more about it somewhere else. We stayed at the Grand Victorian Inn in Park City, and it's an old, kind of restored hotel. It used to be part, I don't think it was a railroad station or anything like that, but I think it was the kind of place where people taking the train into the cave would stop and spend the night or spend a week or whatever. And they've restored it into a nice bed and breakfast. And again, that's in Park City, and we stayed there one night. It was a very nice bed and breakfast, and it was cheaper than staying at the Mammoth Cave Lodge, for what that's worth. And they had a really nice breakfast in the morning. I think they have a standard breakfast every morning. It's not continental. It's a very nice hot breakfast, French toast. I want to say there were eggs, coffee. It was a really nice breakfast. If you're staying several nights, though, I think they do the same breakfast every morning. Oh, and by the way, that's the little ledge where Edwin Booth was rumored to have given his, I think, a presentation of Hamlet. And I know I've heard guides talk about that, but that's the ledge. But yeah, the Grand Victorian Inn, we liked that a lot. In fact, I want to stay there again. The train tracks go right in front of it, and I enjoy that. I am okay with hearing a train in the middle of the night. We actually once looked at a house by a train track, and I got really excited, and my wife said no. And our realtor said, no, you won't be able to resell this. But I thought, man, wouldn't it be great to see a train go by your house and hear one go by frequently? That's just me, though. But anyway, yeah, at the Grand Victorian, okay, yeah, we're back up towards the rotunda, and you can see lots of people kind of roaming around. Especially if this is your first trip into the cave, this is epic. And there's just a whole lot of history, a whole lot of nature, a whole lot of everything going on. Yeah, the Grand Victorian Inn, though, we liked it a lot. The train did go by a few times during the night. I loved that. But a couple of the guests, mentioned that in the morning. But I thought that was just a bonus. And we did go walk. We walked up and down the railroad tracks that evening before we went to bed. And I just love that. It's something pretty cool, though, and especially if you're into old history, old railroads, Mammoth Cave, and all that, that would be a great place to stay on your trip. And for what it's worth, we're starting to kind of head out of the cave. We're not quite to the exit yet, but you can see it up ahead. Just to give you a little idea of what it looks like when you come in or come out of the cave. Yeah, you see some light opening there from the main entrance. And again, they have a little gate there. When I was there in the 80s, I don't really remember that gate. I'm sure that's kind of new. I'm sure they had some sort of a different gate. But a couple walking in front of us there. I think that's a dad and his daughter. That'd be a really fun trip to take with a parent. And it's not, I think even for this tour, tickets were about $18 each, which, national park, you get to go see the longest cave system in the world. I mean, I don't think that's a bad deal at all. Especially with what you get with the rangers and the interpretation and all that. And it's a fun park. And it's just a nice park to roam around. One of the rangers mentioned, I think it was the lady at the front, mentioned the white nose syndrome going on with the bats. If you haven't read up on that, that is just a major crisis in the bat world, and it's something kind of wiping out bats all over the place, and it's definitely something we should all be concerned about. You know, when you think about bats and their link in the chain and what they do. Yeah, look, Google that if you have a moment, but it's affecting a lot of caves. Some caves have been shut down because of that. Okay, yeah, and as we're leaving this front gate area, if you look almost right in the middle of the screen, the dad is blocking it out right now, but you see the door, the kind of metal door, and it's been graffitied, and I brought that up earlier. Somebody had to have been really bold to go in there. The ranger that I talked to actually said that somebody went in 45 minutes after the park closed and did that. And that... So, I mean, somebody risked a lot of trouble. You know, they'd have to get into the park, run down to the historic entrance, run down those stairs, graffiti that door, and then run back up. Just seems stupid. I'm certain they'll be caught, but that's just always useless. Right around here, as you come out of the cave, you go from being nice and cool to just feeling that heat on you. You know, it's hot. It is really hot. And then this is up. I skipped over I edited out the steps, and this is us walking over the little. This is actually just sudsy water. They make you. I'd say they ask you, but they require that you walk over this just little pad of sudsy water, get some suds on your shoes to clean your shoes off, and not spread any of the white nose disease to other caves. And this is the line going back into the cave. There's blocks for the social distancing. That is not mist. That is the humidity, the condensation hitting my camera because it was so hot. And then this is, we're walking over the bridge going from the main Mammoth Cave Visitor Center over to the lodge, the main building at the lodge. And that's the hill going down to the historic entrance. We just came up that hill. And forget your cave tour, they're not exhausting. Coming up that hill after you come out of that nice cool cave into the hot air, and then you're walking uphill for a while, that is what gets me every time. And you will breathe heavy coming up that hill. And this is us going back over the bridge towards the main Mammoth Cave National Park Visitor Center. That bridge has always been here as long as I can remember. It used to be different. I think it used to be wider. You know, it's a little more just scenic now with that nice fence by it. There's a guy walking his dog. The visitor center and that bridge have been updated quite a bit since I remember being there back in the 80s. And I've got some old postcards showing that bridge. Everybody remembers that bridge. It kind of sticks out in your head. Oh, okay, and this is us leaving the parking lot area there at Mammoth Cave. I think that's what we're doing. You'll give it a second or two. But we almost always see deer through here. You know, I mentioned you see them when you come into the park. I've seen a bazillion deer in the parking lot at the visitor center. And it always seems like I see them, well, we're always getting there early and we're always leaving late. We didn't leave too late this day. I think we actually left at a decent time. We wanted to get home, drive through Campbellsville on the way. Stop at, yeah, by the way, yeah, we always go from Lexington to Mammoth Cave, and we stop in Campbellsville, which I think is a really underrated city. They have a really nice post office there. You know, I love post offices. And there's a great bookstore. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's just a really nice small bookstore, and I'm always finding good stuff there. Little independent bookstore, and they just always have something unique and different. Right, and it's right next to 'n' Harding Coffee. So yeah, we're driving out of the Mammoth Cave Visitor Center parking lot, and we're starting to drive up towards the path we were on earlier. We went hiking just for a little bit before our cave tour, and we're driving up towards the little hiking trail we took. Up on the right is the train that I filmed earlier at a kind of a close angle. And then we're about to pass the post office and the supply store up here on the right. And you'll have to forgive my dashboard reflecting into the windshield. But yeah, see that sidewalk there is kind of going off into the woods, and that's where we were walking a little bit earlier today. So yeah, and we're kind of leaving the national park area, driving up towards the interstate. And there's some above average, some above average gift shops as you get closer to the interstate. I like stopping at them. Some of them are just really novel and just interesting, kind of throwbacks in a way. I know, you know, the Gatlinburg comparison is totally unfair, because if you go to Gatlinburg, you could go to gift shops for weeks and, you know, see new stuff. I mean, there's just so many gift shops there with some pretty slick items and some pretty cheap items too. But through this area, there's a few, and some of them are interesting. I'd say they're all interesting and worth sticking your head into. A friend of mine went to Mammoth Cave not too long ago, and I know they stopped at an antique shop. They said they stopped at several gift shops, antique shops, and had this experience. There's one in particular that is terrible about this. I don't want to name names, but there's a little antique shop, and we walked in and it looked really interesting, and we walked right back out. It obviously the staff there smokes. They smoke heavily, they smoke often. You know, we didn't see them smoking when we walked in, but the place was so saturated with cigarette smoke. Even if I looked around, I would have had to have gotten one good deal, you know, for me to, well, if you collect anything, cigarette smoke is a really tough thing to get rid of. I love old books, and I have bought a couple of books that smelt pretty thickly of cigarette smoke. I paid way down on them. If that's an issue with something, I'm not. It's got to be really cheap for me to deal with it. You know, you can use kitty litter, you can use coffee grinds. There's ways to get rid of that smell, but you've got to really work on it. And some items, clothes, you know, some bigger things. A book, I can probably get rid of that smell with some work and some time. But it's work, and again, I'd have to make sure I got a good deal on something if I was gonna get into it. But yeah, there's one antique shop in particular that is that it's an issue. It's a real issue, and we'll never go back there again. I don't know how they have customers, to be honest. But there's, you know, and that might not be an issue for you, but a buddy of mine, it was a pretty big issue for them. It's an issue for me too. Yeah, an antique shop should not smell like cigarette smoke. But there are some other really interesting souvenir shops. Also, you know, this is cave country, and you got there's some other caves that are not Mammoth Cave in this area. And that's pretty cool, and that's a whole topic for another day too. There's diamond caverns, there's various onyx caves. Man, they're all fun. I love going into all of them. Just, you know, seeing the setup, seeing the formations, and seeing how big or how tight of a squeeze some of them are. Some of them can get a little claustrophobic. So yeah, but they're all neat, and I always, speaking of souvenir shops and souvenirs, I've always got to get some postcards, a patch. I've been picking up hiking medallions lately. I do love, especially when I'm looking at antique stores, I love finding, an old Mammoth Cave postcard. I've found a few old ticket stubs from some caves too, and I love that kind of thing. Another thing that I think is really neat is Mammoth Cave at the main entrance. Back, I want to say up until the 70s, and I know the Kentucky Explorer did a really neat article on this, but for several decades, I want to say up through the 70s, they used to do the whole souvenir photo thing where they would take your picture in front of the main historic entrance there. And I don't know if they had somebody trying to sell them to you later on your way out or what, but I've seen those at antique shops, and I've picked up a few when I've seen them, cheap. Those are pretty cool. I don't know why they don't do that now. They used to do the old, pose for a photo and we'll sell it to you later thing. And they're cool pictures because, you get the 1950s or whatever, and, they're group photos. They're not doing this, you guys step up, then we get the next couple. It's a big group photo. And I think that's really cool, seeing the kind of groups that would go into Mammoth Cave. That's a neat souvenir. That's something nice and old to find, and they pop up frequently. Yeah, so the other caves in the area are a lot of fun, and I know I talked to another couple the other day who went down to Mammoth Cave recently, I think a couple of weekends ago, and they went a little bit later and they could not get tickets, so they ended up going to Diamond Caverns, which was a good choice. So, a lot of those businesses kind of get the overflow, couldn't get a ticket to Mammoth Cave business. But yeah, those are worth checking out. And I know when we're traveling, just anywhere, I like to look and see if there's some show caves to go to. Oh, and Horse Cave. Horse Cave is nearby, and again, this is probably a subject for another day. Horse Cave has their kind of, legendary other cave that they go through. And we took that tour. In fact, I videotaped that one. I'll probably try to put that one up in the near future. But Horse Cave's just an interesting little city not too far from here. They've got their own cave, and they have a cave museum there also. And they have a zip line. You can pretty much zip line right over the entrance to their cave. And that's kind of become the new Pan for Gold attraction, kind of co-attraction at a cave, is zip lining. But their zip line looked pretty cool. I've done zip lining before. We did zip lining in the Mega Caverns in Louisville, which was a really cool thing to do. That was a lot of fun, but I would zip line again, but I wouldn't go out of my way for it. I definitely enjoyed it at the Mega Caverns. And one of the zip lines, at the very end, you're basically looking down. I mean, you're about to jump off a ledge that's about a 200-foot drop, I would say. Zip lining. Here's the kayak and canoeing rental businesses up here are doing pretty good. Look at that. They've got some good crowds there. I've not done that in this area. I'll probably have to do that someday too. But yeah, zip lining is it's pretty cool, but I mean, it's not something I would want to do every single weekend. Going to caves, I could do that quite a bit though, and we do that as often as we can. I think we're getting pretty close to Big Mike's Rock Shop and Souvenirs. And that's something, if you've not been to the Mammoth Cave area, or if you're thinking about going to Mammoth Cave, to me, Big Mike's is a must-stop. In fact, I had a friend who had just gotten into rock collecting, and he and I came up to Mammoth Cave one Saturday, and we stopped at Big Mike's, and we were there for quite a while. And we ended up not even going to the cave. We did some other stuff, but Big Mike's was basically our whole day was Big Mike's. Yeah, we are coming up on Big Mike's. We're about to turn into it. And they have, standard kind of souvenirs, but they got a lot of them and they got good prices. They've also got just other stuff. I've found old trading cards in there. They obviously have t-shirts. They have a kind of a mystery house that you can tour. I think it's $1 or $2 to tour their mystery house, and they sell rocks and you know, gems or what. I know there's people that collect rocks and they are big on rocks. They also had this dinosaur head there. That's just kind of cool. That's worth stopping to see anyway. And I like dinosaurs, so they've got some toy dinosaurs set up too. I love this. I just think this is cool. There's kind of their letter when they bought the dinosaur skull about how they got it and where it came from. You know, and I mentioned earlier my friend Brent. And Brent and I coming up to Mammoth Cave as we were growing up and younger. And I want to say in the probably in the late 80s, early 90s, probably like 89 or 91 or something like that, we came up one day and we met Big Mike. And it's just a nice, I remember he was in a wheelchair and he was just a super nice guy. We talked to him for quite a while and he showed us the skull. He was all proud of it. And we were really impressed with Big Mike and with Big Mike's. And there's the rest of the shop. I just do a quick pan around down the stairs showing you some of the shop. But we met Big Mike, and he was just a nice guy. You could tell he was enthusiastic about about his Big Mo skull, and just a nice guy. We're about to pull out of Big Mike's now. But I found out that he died at some point, probably shortly after we were there and talked to him. Somebody told me that. I think his family was running the place for some time after that. But I'm glad that me and my friend Brent got to meet Big Mike. That was just kind of cool. That's us leaving the gift shop area. Over on the left, probably just out of my range. Oh wait, hold on, I'm going to pull over here so you can see it. There is a big kind of sculpture, I guess, of Big Mo. And then just a little bit still out of my camera range is where they sell the rocks, the rock shop. They have, you know, geodes and sculpted glass-like rocks. My friend that collects rocks loves it. But yeah, they have, I mean, you know, the kind of stuff I love. Patches, postcards, stickers. You know, if you want to buy some friends back home something cool for Mammoth Cave, they've got the prices that you want. Yeah, we're about to obviously leave the parking lot. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole trip that we took here recently. Again, I thought it would be fun or interesting for historic purposes to try to film one of the tours going on while, you know, the whole coronavirus thing is going on. All of the rangers we encountered had masks on, and I know we passed a couple of rangers in the cave. Look at that little squirrel, he's about to jump. Oh, there he goes. The rangers that we passed in the cave, all of those guys had masks on. We wore masks into the cave. My wife is very cautious, and I think kept hers on the whole time. I took mine off after a bit. It was just a little too stuffy. I know when we were out and about and kind of in the crowds, I would put it on, but down in the cave, I took mine off. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting to kind of film how the cave was operating during this time in our history, because hopefully somebody will come up with a vaccine soon and we can all get back to living a normal life. But while things aren't normal, I thought that would be something to check out. So yeah, we're going, okay, there's Big Mike's again. There's a sign for Diamond Caverns. And there's Big Mike's there. Yeah, you can see the rock shop there from the road. And going up towards the interstate, there's some other attractions up there. I haven't done Guntown Mountain. I did. Brent and I were up there once when we were in school, but I haven't done it recently enough to say I've really done it. And I know there's some haunted houses up here, and there's the dinosaur attraction where they have the big painted dinosaurs, kind of life-size dinosaurs, and you can go through that park. I've heard that's really cool, but I've heard it's really cool if you do it with kids. So the next time I'm hanging out with some friends that have kids and I can talk them into going to this area, I want to go visit that dinosaur attraction. Oh, the restaurants up through here. There was an independent place we tried to go to probably 6 months ago, and it was not good at all. It's coming up on our left. I'm not going to name it, but yeah, we went to a place that just was not very good. It was terrible, and we ended up going over to Cracker Barrel, and I love hitting the independent places. There's another Diamond Cavern sign. I love going to the independent places, but in this area we've had a ton of good luck. Oh, Crystal Onyx Cave, there's a sign for that. I went there not too long ago. That's a great cave too. Yeah, the Cracker Barrel up here is really, really good. And consistently, they're consistently, they have quality stuff. Sign for the Mammoth Cave Wildlife Museum. Oh, and at the Mammoth Cave Lodge, they have good food. We've had some really nice meals there. They got a catfish po' boy that I really, really enjoy. Well, I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit, I think. I hope you enjoyed touring Mammoth Cave with me. Don't forget to check out my blog if you have a moment. It's Kentucky Travels at blogspot.com. I'm Jim Arado. Thanks.